2 years. That's how long my best friend sat across from me, looked me in the eyes, listened to me cry, held my hands, and told me everything was going to be okay. 2 years of birthday dinners and Sunday phone calls and late-night texts. 2 years of her saying, "I don't know what Rich's problem is. You are an amazing wife." 2 years of me trusting her with the most private, painful corners of my marriage, while she already knew. She knew exactly what the problem was, because she was it. 25 years of friendship, dissolved in the 2 seconds it took for them to turn around and look at me standing in my own kitchen doorway. Now, most people in my position would have fallen apart. And I'll be honest with you, I did. For a while, I fell apart very quietly and very thoroughly. The way you do when the betrayal is so big that your body doesn't quite know how to process it all at once. But here's what nobody tells you about hitting rock bottom. When you are all the way down there, with nothing left to lose and nothing left to protect, you become capable of things you never imagined. You stop being afraid. You stop being careful. You stop shrinking yourself to keep other people comfortable. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, you end up standing in a wedding venue parking lot in a navy dress, next to a man your former best friend had been secretly stalking for years, watching her world fall apart the same way she once watched yours. I didn't plan it that way, but I'm not sorry it happened. Before you hear what happened next, I want to ask you something. If you're watching this and you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, I want you to leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from and what your experience was. Now let me tell you the rest of this story. Her name was Patricia. Patty. She and I had been best friends since we were 19 years old, standing in line at a community college registration desk, both of us reaching for the same pen at the same time. We laughed about it. We went for coffee after. 25 years of friendship grew from that one moment. She was the maid of honor at my wedding. She held my hand when I had my first miscarriage. She was the first person I called when I got promoted, when I got scared, when I needed someone to tell me the truth. I thought she was the one person in my life who was purely, unconditionally in my corner. My husband's name was Richard. Rich. We met when I was 28. He was charming, good-looking in that quiet way. The kind of man who remembered her coffee order and fixed things around the house without being asked. I thought he was solid. I thought he was safe. 11 years of marriage, and I thought I knew exactly who he was. But here's the thing about people. They show you what they want you to see. And for years, both of them had been showing me a carefully arranged picture while something else entirely was happening behind it. After that Tuesday, I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I'm sure some people would have, and honestly, no judgment if you would have too. But I went very, very quiet. I picked up my keys from the floor. I looked at both of them, and I said very calmly, "How long?" Patty started to cry. Rich looked at the table. "How long?" I asked again. He said, "About 2 years." 2 years. 2 years of holidays and birthday dinners and phone calls where Patty had listened to me talk about problems in my marriage, problems I now understood she had helped create. 2 years of sitting at my table, eating my food, hugging me goodbye at the door. 2 years. I told them both to get out of my house. Rich tried to talk. I held up my hand. There are moments in life where words become useless, where the only thing left is dignity, and I was holding on to mine with everything I had. They left. The door closed, and I sat down on that yellow kitchen table, and I cried until there was nothing left in me. The next few months are not easy to talk about, but I'm going to be honest with you, because I think honesty is the only thing that makes a story worth telling. I was devastated. Not just hurt, devastated in that deep, cellular way where you start to question everything you know about yourself. Because when someone you love betrays you, especially 2 people at once, the first thing you do is ask, what did I miss? How did I not see this? What is wrong with me? I went through all of that. I cried in parking lots. I couldn't eat properly for weeks. I had nights where I just lay on the floor of my bedroom because getting into the bed felt like too much to manage. But I also had people. I had my sister Carol who drove 4 hours to come stay with me. I had neighbors who brought food. I had a therapist named Dr. Ellen who I started seeing twice a week, who sat across from me with this steady, calm expression and slowly helped me understand that what happened was not a reflection of my worth as a person. It was a reflection of their choices. I filed for divorce. Rich didn't fight it. I think the guilt made him agreeable, or maybe he just wanted to get on with his new life. The papers were signed within 8 months. I got the house. I got the yellow kitchen table. I painted over the yellow, actually. Painted it white. New chapter. Now here's where the story takes a turn that I still, to this day, cannot fully believe. About 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my sister Carol called me with some news. She had a friend, let's call her Linda, who moved in the same social circles as Patty. And according to Linda, Patty and Rich were engaged. They were planning a wedding. I won't pretend that didn't hurt. Of course it hurt, but it was a dull hurt by then, like an old bruise. What surprised me more was what Linda said next. She said that in the last few months, Patty had become completely obsessed with a man named Garrett. Garrett was a local man, a few years younger than us, who had moved to the area about 3 years prior. He was tall, quiet, a little mysterious, ran his own small landscaping business, kept mostly to himself, was known around town as a genuinely good and decent person. And apparently, Patty had developed what could only be described as a fixation on him. Now, I didn't know Garrett personally at that point, but Linda told me things that made my skin crawl. Patty had been showing up at places she knew Garrett would be. She had driven past his house. She had created a fake social media profile to follow his accounts. She had asked mutual friends about his personal life in ways that made them uncomfortable. One woman told Linda that Patty had actually memorized his weekly schedule. And Garrett, this poor man, had noticed. He'd mentioned to a couple of people that there was a woman making him uneasy, but he didn't know quite what to do about it. Linda told me all of this not as gossip, but because she thought I should know. She thought, given everything Patty had done to me, that maybe I would want to be aware of the kind of person my former best friend really was. And that's when something shifted in me. I want to be clear about what happened next, because I've told this story to a few people, and some of them assumed I was acting out of revenge. But that's not quite right. Revenge is hot and impulsive. What I did was deliberate and, I believe, actually right. I reached out to Garrett, not through someone else. I found his landscaping business listing, called the number, and left a message saying I was a local resident. I had some information I thought might be relevant to his personal safety, and I would appreciate 15 minutes of his time if he was willing. He called me back the same evening. I could tell from his voice that he was cautious, maybe a little skeptical. I told him who I was. I told him that my former best friend, a woman named Patricia, had recently gotten engaged to my ex-husband, and I told him what Linda had told me about his situation with Patty. There was a long silence. Then he said, "How do you know her?" And I told him everything. We met for coffee the following Saturday. I was nervous. I don't know what I expected. Maybe someone closed off or suspicious. But Garrett turned out to be one of the most straightforward, grounded people I'd ever met. He was direct without being unkind. He listened without interrupting. And when I finished telling him the whole story, Rich, Patty, the kitchen table, all of it, he looked at me and said, "I'm sorry that happened to you. That's a terrible thing." Simple as that. No advice, no judgment, just acknowledgement. Do you know how rare that is? We talked for almost 3 hours. He told me about the things Patty had done that had made him uncomfortable. The drive-bys, the fake profile, the time she had shown up at a barbecue at a friend's house that he was attending, a barbecue she had absolutely no connection to, and had spent the entire evening trying to position herself near him. He had started to feel genuinely uneasy, and he had been weighing whether to do something official about it. I encouraged him to document everything. Write down dates, times, incidents. Tell the friends who'd witnessed things. Because regardless of what happened next with me, Patty's behavior toward him was not okay, and he deserved to have a record of it. He thanked me. We exchanged numbers in case he needed to reach me for any documentation, and we went our separate ways. I went home that Saturday feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happy exactly, but clear. Like a fog had lifted. Like I had done something useful with my pain, instead of just carrying it around. Garrett texted me that evening. Just a short message. Thank you for reaching out. That took courage. I hope things keep getting better for you. I stared at that message for a long time. Over the next few weeks, we texted occasionally. Nothing romantic. Just two people who had found themselves connected by an unusual and difficult set of circumstances. He updated me on the documentation. I told him about adjusting to life post-divorce. At some point, without either of us really planning it, we started talking every day. And then one evening he called instead of texted, and we talked for 2 hours. And somewhere in the middle of talking about our childhoods and our favorite seasons and the books we'd read, I realized I was smiling in a way I hadn't smiled in a very long time. I want to say clearly that what grew between Garrett and me was not part of any plan. I did not call him thinking, this is how I get even. I called him because a woman I knew had been frightening him, and I thought he deserved to know why. Whatever came after that was its own separate, real, unexpected thing. Now, the wedding. About 4 months after that first coffee, Carol called me again. Patty and Rich had set a date. The wedding was in 6 weeks. It was going to be at the Harrington estate, a beautiful old venue about 20 minutes outside of town. Fancy invitations, seated dinner, a whole production. I was not invited, obviously. But here's the thing about small towns and overlapping social circles. Information travels. And what traveled back to me, through Linda, through Carol, through a cascading series of people who apparently had very little loyalty to Patty and Rich at this point, was that Patty had been telling people I was broken by the divorce, that I had fallen apart, that she felt sorry for me. I let that sit for a few days. Then I called Garrett and told him what I'd heard. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do you want to go to the wedding?" I laughed. I said, "We're not invited." He said, "I know. Do you want to go anyway?" Now, before anyone gets the wrong idea, we didn't crash the wedding in a destructive way. We didn't stand up during the vows and cause a scene. We didn't ruin anything or harm anyone. What we did was this. The Harrington estate had a long driveway, and guests arrived and mingled outside before being directed into the main hall. It was an outdoor cocktail hour first, on the lawn, very visible from the road and from the parking area. And Garrett, who, let me remind you, had legitimate reasons to want Patty to see him in a context she could not control, suggested that we simply arrive during that cocktail hour, walk through the parking area, visible and composed, and let the universe take care of the rest. I wore a navy dress. Garrett wore a gray suit. We looked, if I do say so, wonderful. We pulled into the parking area just as the cocktail hour was beginning. There were maybe 60 or 70 people milling around outside. And within about 3 minutes, I counted, Patty saw us. I will never forget the look on her face as long as I live. It wasn't just surprise. It wasn't just shock. It was the particular expression of a person who has built a version of reality inside their own head. A version where they are winning, where the person they wronged is somewhere crumbling, where everything has gone according to plan, and then had that version shatter completely in real time. She went pale. She grabbed Rich's arm. Rich turned and saw me, and his expression was something else entirely. Guilt and regret, and a kind of grief that I no longer had any responsibility for. And next to me was Garrett, the man she had been following and fixating on, standing next to the woman she had betrayed. Calm, composed, and holding my hand. We didn't speak to them. We didn't need to. We stood in that parking area for maybe 10 minutes, said hello to a few people we knew, and then we left. I've heard different accounts of what happened inside after that. I wasn't there, so I can only tell you what found its way back to me over the following weeks. Apparently Patty was visibly shaken through most of the ceremony. A few guests noticed she seemed distracted and upset. Whether that affected her wedding day in any serious way, well, I honestly don't spend much time thinking about it. That stopped being my concern a long time ago. What I do know is that Rich, according to someone who knows him well, went very quiet at the reception, and that he and Patty apparently had a long and difficult argument in the week following the wedding about a number of things, including, I was told, the fact that he had not known the full extent of her behavior toward Garrett, and learning about it from mutual friends at his own wedding reception did not go over well. Again, not my doing, just the truth having its natural way of coming out eventually. As for Garrett and me, I'm going to tell you this part carefully, because it's the part that matters most to me personally. What grew between us was slow and real. There was no rushing, no grand gestures. Just two people who had both been through hard things, who were both a little cautious and a little bruised, learning to trust someone again. He is patient. He is funny in the driest possible way. The kind of funny where you don't always realize a joke has been made until 3 seconds after he says it. He fixes things without being asked. Not because he's performing helpfulness, but because he genuinely notices when something needs attention. He is, in the truest sense of the word, a good man. And he tells me, regularly, that reaching out to him that first time was one of the bravest things he'd ever seen someone do. I don't know if I'd call it brave. I think I just got tired of being quiet about things that deserve to be spoken aloud. I want to talk for a minute about forgiveness, because I know it's the question people always ask. Have I forgiven Rich? Have I forgiven Patty? Here's my honest answer. I have released them. I don't carry them around inside me like hot coals anymore. The anger is gone. The grief is mostly gone. I don't wish them specific harm, but forgiveness. The kind where you say, what you did was okay, or where you open the door back up to those people. No, I don't think I owe anyone that. I think forgiveness is a personal thing, and it doesn't have to mean reconciliation. It doesn't have to mean pretending the wound wasn't real or that it didn't matter. What I have is something better than the anger I used to carry. I have a life that is genuinely mine, a house I love, work I find meaningful, a sister who drives 4 hours when I need her, a therapist who helped me find myself again, and a man who looked at me across a coffee table when I was still healing and saw something worth knowing. That's not a small thing. That's everything. I also want to say something to anyone watching this who is in the middle of a betrayal right now. Maybe you just found out. Maybe you're on the floor, metaphorically or literally. Maybe you're in that place where you can't see how things could ever be okay again. I want to tell you something that I wish someone had told me on that Tuesday in October. The life you're losing is not the only life available to you. I know it doesn't feel that way right now. I know it feels like the floor has dropped out and there is nothing solid beneath you. But you are not being destroyed. You are being redirected. And sometimes the thing that looks like the worst day of your life is actually the first day of a completely different story. One you couldn't have imagined from inside the old one. I'm not saying the pain isn't real. It is. Grieve it. Cry in the parking lots. Eat the takeout. Sleep too much or not enough. Do whatever you need to do to get through the days. But also know this. You are still here. You still have choices. And the people who betrayed you do not get to write the ending of your story. Only you get to do that. Rich and Patty are still married, as far as I know. I don't track their lives anymore. I heard through Carol that things have been rocky, which surprises no one. A relationship built on betrayal doesn't typically produce a peaceful foundation. But that's their business, not mine. Garrett and I are taking things one day at a time, which at our age is not a sign of uncertainty. It's a sign of wisdom. We've both learned that rushing doesn't make things more solid. What makes things solid is showing up, honestly, day after day, and choosing each other when you don't have to. We went back to that coffee shop where we first met for a proper sit-down. A few months after everything happened, we sat in the same seats. The same server was working, and Garrett looked at me over his coffee cup and said, completely deadpan, "You know, most people meet through apps these days." I nearly choked laughing. The yellow kitchen table is long gone. The white one suits me better, honestly. I have plants on the windowsill now, something I never did before, because Rich was against clutter, and somewhere along the way I had absorbed his preferences as my own without even noticing. Now I have 7 plants. They are slightly out of control, and I love every single one of them. My therapist says that the small reclamations matter as much as the big ones. The plants, the paint color, the choice to go to a movie alone and enjoy it, the ability to eat dinner at 9 o'clock at night if you feel like it, because there's no one to accommodate but yourself. I used to think being alone was something to be afraid of. Now I understand it was just something to get acquainted with. And once I did, it stopped being so frightening. I'll end with this. There's a version of this story where I crumble, where I never call Garrett, where I spend years bitter and closed off, carrying the weight of what they did to me like a stone around my neck. And there is this version, the real version, where I picked up my keys off the floor and walked back into my own life and slowly, imperfectly, magnificently rebuilt it into something I'm genuinely proud of. Both were possible. I just chose this one. And if you are sitting somewhere right now wondering which version of your story you're going to live, I hope you choose the one where you stand up, where you make the call, where you walk into the parking lot in the navy dress and hold your head high and let the truth do what truth does. I hope you choose the version where you win, not by taking anything from them, but by building something so good, so real, so entirely your own, that winning is the only word left for it. That's my story. All of it. The ugly parts and the beautiful parts and the completely unbelievable parts that somehow happened anyway. If this meant something to you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Leave a comment below. I want to know where in the world you're watching from, and I want to know if this story touched you in any way. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. There are more stories coming. Real ones. Human ones. The kind that remind you what people are capable of. Both the worst of it and the very, very best. Thank you for being here. Take good care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.